Israel is not a lifeboat, it's a lifeline. Everyone around the world, and in particular Muslims and Jews, paid a great deal of attention to President Barack Obama's speech at a Cairo university this past Thursday. I'm most interested in the part of the speech in which he spoke about Israel, and I'm actually quite fascinated by one passage in which Obama links the existence of the state of Israel to the Holocaust. Obama talks about the American bond with Israel, which he says is unbreakable, and then he says it is based upon the cultural and historical ties and the recognition that the aspiration for a Jewish homeland is rooted in a tragic history that cannot be denied. And Obama goes on and tells about his plans to go visit the concentration camp at Buchenwald. He talks about Holocaust denial, but essentially what Obama is articulating is that the existence of the State of Israel is rooted in a tragic history, is rooted in the Holocaust. And what Obama is saying is that Israel was a lifeboat for the refugees who came over from Europe after the Holocaust. And this is unfortunately a misconception. It's a misconception that is on the part of this current administration and the president. It's a misconception that's actually even more tragic when it's held on the part of the Arab world. And indeed, what Obama's mistake was, is that he assumes that the worst form of denial in the Arab world is Holocaust denial. Actually, the worst form of denial in the Arab world is Israel denial. And indeed, the lack of understanding of the sources of the State of Israel is something that confounds the peace process. You know, there was an interview with the chief Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, on Al Jazeera TV, March 27th of this year, March 27th, 2009. And Erekat was speaking to the interviewer and saying that he's going to reveal a secret about the negotiations at Camp David in 2000 between Prime Minister Barak and Yasser Arafat. And he tells about how President Clinton came over to Arafat and said he basically will become the president of the first Palestinian state with 67 borders. He will get East Jerusalem as the capital of the new Palestinian state. The only thing Clinton asked of Arafat was that as a religious man he needs to acknowledge, I'll use the exact quote that Erekat uses, as a religious man to acknowledge that the Temple of Solomon is located underneath the Haram al-Sharif. That essentially that all Arafat had to do to make a deal going back to 67 borders, all he had to do was acknowledge the fact that there is a Temple of Solomon that existed on that site, and that archaeologically and historically, this is a site that belongs to the people of Israel. This is a site that belongs to Judaism. Arafat responded to Clinton defiantly. I will not be a traitor. Someone will come to liberate it in 10, 50, or 100 years. Jerusalem will be nothing but the capital of the Palestinian state, and there is nothing underneath or above the Haram al-Sharif except for Allah. This is Erekat's recounting of what occurred on July 23rd, 2000 at Camp David. And this is why the negotiations fell apart, because Yasser Arafat could not acknowledge that there are historical roots to the State of Israel. He could not acknowledge that there was a Temple of Solomon. He could not acknowledge that the Jewish people have been in the land of Israel for 3,300 years. So if President Obama wants to worry about forms of denial in the Arab world, the one that is most significant and most critical is Israel denial, not Holocaust denial. Israel denial denies the fact that the Jews have a 3,300-year history in the land of Israel. But the people that I worry about the most are actually the Jewish people. We sometimes forget our historical and spiritual and religious roots in the land of Israel. We forget that some 3,800 years ago, Abraham and Sarah came to this land to settle it. We forget that 3,300 years ago, the Jews came out of Egypt and settled into this land. And we forget that this is the land in which most of the Tanakh, most of the Hebrew Bible was written. This is a mistake that we make. And unfortunately, we take our children on trips to Poland and Israel. A wonderful trip called the March of the Living. But the way that we frame the trip is that Poland is the serious part and Israel is the fun part. And tragically, that is an enormous mistake because Israel is very serious indeed. It is a place that our ancestors have dreamed of. You know, there are so many passages, whether it be the famous passage in the 137th Psalm, where it talks about that the Jews, 2,500 years ago in their first exile to Babylonia, they stood at the rivers of Babylon and they cried when they remembered Zion. 2,500 years ago, their first exile, a place that actually is quite comfortable, Babylonia. They sit at these beautiful rivers and they cry. They remember Zion. And they vow, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let me forget my right hand. For 2,500 years, Jews have remembered Jerusalem, even if they are away from Jerusalem. And indeed, as the custom is noted in the Talmud, that Jews would come back to the land of Israel. They would re-enter, and they would kiss the stones. They would kiss the ground, because it was something so beloved. And it is this fact, the fact that Israel is the lifeline of the Jewish spirit, the lifeline of the Jewish people. It is not just a lifeboat for refugees. It is a lifeline of spirit that we have to remember. And unfortunately, it is most tragic when Jews forget it. If I may just mention one more thing. When 42 years ago, when Jews re-entered into Jerusalem, and they were able to visit the Kotel HaMaravi, the Western Wall, for the first time in 18 years, the soldiers that were first there talk about their experiences. One was Moshe Amirav, who was a paratrooper, who talks about how he was walking to the Kotel as the first Israelis re-entered the Temple Mount. And he says, little by little, I started getting closer to the Kotel. Slowly, as if I was sent to pray in front of an ark, I came closer, an emissary of Dad, Grandpa, Great-Grandpa, and all the generations from all the diasporas that didn't make it here. And so they sent me here. Someone said the Shechiyanu prayer, and I couldn't say Amen. All I could do was put my hand on the rock, and the tears flowing out of my eyes were not mine. They were the tears of all the people of Israel. Tears of hope and prayer. Hasidic niguns, Jewish dances. Tears that singed and burned the gray, heavy stone. Moshe understood. The state of Israel is not a lifeboat for refugees. The state of Israel is a lifeline for the Jewish spirit. And every time we stand there, we stand for generations of Jews who have been in that country for 3,300 years. And it has indeed remained the lifeline for the Jewish spirit ever since.
Yesha Koach, Rabbi. Thank you.